Hey, welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and what a delight for us to have with us today Professor Joel Marks. He is an adjunct professor of American history at Southern Oregon University and also at Rogue Community College, and we're here to talk about his interesting series that he's doing on American history, America at the Crossroads, a constitutional, economic, and cultural exploration, and an opportunity for you to get in on the last of the series of lectures, which will take place tomorrow night. So, Joel, good to see you. How you doing, my friend?
Thank you very much, Perry. It's great to see you.
Good to see you.
I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, this is wonderful. Why did you do this? What brought you to do this?
Well, 40 years ago, I got the idea that the country was in trouble. And I thought that American history was one of the real needs of the country. And I took it upon myself to study American history as much as I could to find out what I believe is the truth of American history. And it just so happens that in this day and age now, we're in 2015, and the country's on the precipice, in my opinion. The Republic is in very bad shape now.
Yeah, it's in serious. And I don't know if a lot of us understand that. We hear the media and other talk shows, commentators talk about that, but from your studies, perhaps even more so than you thought.
Well, the Constitution of the United States is not being studied the way it should anymore. Not only that, the first 7 presidents of the United States, really excluding John Quincy Adams, who was a great man, but he wasn't what you'd call a great president. The first 7 presidents really tried to hone in on the meaning of the Constitution. And from that point, we can glean what the Constitution means and what they really meant by it. For instance, the General Welfare Clause today means any kind of project a congressman or senator wants. By the way, I'm for repealing the 17th Amendment. I think it's time now that we do that. 17th Amendment, of course, is the election of senators popularly. I think we need to stop doing that. I think we need to go back pre-1913, when the 17th Amendment was actually put in practice, and let the state legislatures choose the senators, because then you'll get states' rights, which we've really broken that boundary of states' rights with the federal government.
You know, I'm hearing more and more people say this, that it's the best way for the states to be represented again back at the federal level.
That's true, because when Lincoln and Douglas had their debate in 1858, Lincoln out-debated Douglas. But it just so happens that the legislature stayed with the Democrats, and they appointed Douglas to be the senator, because that's the way they did it in those days. And of course, Lincoln 2 years later became the president. But if a senator now, let's say we had the old way of doing things, if the senator came back to the district and said, I've got you a sewage plant here in your district, or I've got you a road, or I got you an overpass, and he comes back and says, this is great because we've gotten this, and then the state legislator would say, we don't want that money that you got from the federal government. We want to do it here as the states. And if you do that again, we're not going to reappoint you. Oh my goodness, a chill would go up his spine, and you say, oh, I better not do that again. And then all of a sudden, you've got states' rights. Now, states' rights, of course, has that kind of a negative ring because of the civil rights movement. But states' rights is what we want. We want state sovereignty, because the 10th Amendment lists very categorically, if it's not enumerated in the Constitution, it's the states. And the Constitution really is a state document.
All right, let me say to our viewers and listeners, first of all, Professor Marks is going to be teaching the last of his series, and it'll be tomorrow night from 6:30 to a little after 9, and it'll be at the Medford Library there in the large conference room. Do they just show up? Is that what they do?
Yeah, they just show up, and they come. It doesn't cost anything.
Okay.
It's for free.
Okay. So if you're interested, tomorrow night from 6:30 to about a little after 9, there at the Medford Library in the large conference room, and you'll be taking on the last of this lecture series dealing with restoring America, and I want to get to that in just a moment. But you've been dealing with making of America, capitalism versus socialism, principles, philosophies of the founders, father of the Constitution, founding presidents, and stuff like that. I want to come to number 2, capitalism versus socialism. It seems to be the big debate and argument today. You know, is capitalism being demonized and squeezed out?
Well, this is a great question, Perry. First of all, capitalism, the term capitalism came from Marx, Karl Marx. By the way, I spell my name M-A-R-K-S. There's no X. He termed that, and he actually wanted to do it in a negative way. What we've done and what has happened since the history of man is that we've gone from either tyranny, anarchy, and we've swung back and forth. Socialism has been a very, how shall I say, attractive method of government. It's kind of a lazy way to do things. Right. Capitalism or free market, or free enterprise or free market economics is Adam Smith. And what we need to do now, and what we've done in the country, is we threw Adam Smith out of the colleges and universities in about 1920. We put in Karl Marx, we put in Das Kapital, which is a failure formula, and it's very, very difficult to read. And the Communist Manifesto as well is another failure formula. What we need to do is reinsert Adam Smith's success formula. It was written in 1776, The Wealth of Nations, and let people read that in the colleges. And I have, one of the things I'll mention tomorrow night, I have 11 pages of material that I'm willing to give everybody, all the materials on restoring America. But one of the things we need to do now is, before people graduate high school, they need to have an acquaintanceship with the Wealth of Nations, they need to have an acquaintanceship with the Federalist Papers, and they need to show a proficiency in having read the Constitution and Declaration of Independence and pass that off. There should be a state. We need to do this at the state level so that all the schools can do it, and then they can institute the testing that they want. But they've got to have an understanding of the Wealth of Nations, or at least what it was about, because we've thrown Adam Smith's formula out, and that was an experimental thing that Adam Smith did, and it in the late 1800s, early 1900s of the country, that thing exploded, and that's Adam Smith. All of that capitalism that we talk about exploded. Socialism is a failure formula. It has never succeeded where it's been tried.
Well, I'm sorry we didn't know this from day one. I think we should do a series with you on all 7 of these. Let me just ask you one other question, then we'll jump over to your last session coming up tomorrow night. Mm-hmm. There seems to be a blatant ignoring of the Constitution. It is something to get around or to ignore or just violate. There doesn't seem to be the pushback. Where is the checks and balances of what really is constitutional? Well,
we've lost the checks and balances since about 1883 is where we started to lose it. And what has happened in our country is the founders, who really were individual geniuses on what they were doing, they had their foibles, but the beauty of what they did is they were able to sit down and hash this out and work it out together. Because in the Constitutional Convention in 1787, in about June, late June, the Constitutional Convention almost broke up. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the convention, Benjamin Franklin wept because he didn't think they could do it. He didn't think anybody could put it together, a group of people, and they actually put it together. And it wasn't just compromisers. There was only 3 major compromisers. It was consensus. It took 60 ballots to get a president of the United States. That's consensus. Everybody has their say. And they had a rule in the Constitutional Convention that you could speak only twice on one subject. Of course, Alexander Hamilton got up one time and spoke for 6 straight hours, but and what he wanted was a government like Britain had. But the reason that we've ignored the Constitution now is because we don't know what the limits of each branch of government is. We were taught in school that the branches are co-equal. That is not true. That's a myth. Every single person I know, and I know because I was taught that in school too. Everybody that I know has been taught that. That is not true. They are not co-equal. the judicial branch of government is very, very weak. And if anybody will take the time and read the 78th Federalist by Hamilton, and I don't even like Hamilton that much, but he was brilliant in the things that he wrote in the Federalist Papers. If they'll read the 78th Federalist, which talks about the judiciary, they'll see what the judiciary was meant to do. It's the weakest form of government. They only give an opinion. They don't have any execution power or enforcement power. The president, and it's been done by 3 presidents, the president can say, like Andrew Jackson did in 1832, Mr. Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it. There's no enforcement power in the Supreme Court. The reason that they have become the last word is because we have allowed that. On this gay marriage issue, the Supreme Court has no right to make any decision on that. That's a decision for each state, the people in that state. And for what California did when they overruled the ballot measure in California, a man and a woman should be a marriage, they did that twice, and then a judge came along and overruled that. Governor Brown of California should have come out very strongly and said, we're not going to listen, we're not going to execute that because, first of all, it's not constitutional, and second of all, the people have spoken. He didn't do that. And that's the way the thing should operate. Now, the legislature, in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 2, there's an exceptions clause in there. And the legislature can do anything they want with the Supreme Court. They created the Supreme Court. They can do anything they want. They can have John Roberts in a candle if they wanted. But it's up, the legislature has that power. They created it. And that's why when Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1935 tried to pack the Supreme Court, he wanted 15. The legislature said no. They were Democrats.
Fascinating. I wish I had you for hours, but what's so interesting about this is that we're seeing the courts now actually legislate. So right. We're going to take a break. We'll come back. I want to get into what you're going to be talking about tomorrow night: restoring America, solutions for the courts, solutions for Congress, solutions for the president. Okay, he's the man. He's the professor. We'll be right back with Professor Marks in just a moment.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
All right, we're back, and what an honor to have with us today Joel Marks. He's an adjunct professor of American history, teaches at Southern Oregon University and Rogue Community College. He's finishing up a series tomorrow night. It's totally free, and it's going to be down at the Medford Library in room 205. Excuse me, that's the address, in the large conference room there in the library in downtown Medford. Starts at 6:30. Probably will go a little past 9, but this will be the end of 7 lectures that Professor Marks has delivered, and this one will be dealing with restoring America. And by the way, you are what they call the professor with the OSU Lifelong Learning Institute.
That's
what
right.
is that?
That's right. That's mostly retired people, and they come to either SOU or RCC down here, and I teach at both of them, and they can sign up, they pay a certain amount to get into that program for the year, and then they can take as many classes as they want. Okay. And I'm one of the teachers for that program.
Is it credited? I mean, for the students?
They can get 1 credit if they take 10 classes in a row. Like I taught a class on the history of the Cold War, and there were 10 classes there, and they can get 1 credit for that.
All right. Again, he's been teaching a series, America at the Crossroads, a constitutional, economical, and cultural exploration, and we're just kind of highlighted some of these. I've already determined in my mind we're going to have them back. But let's talk about the one you're dealing with tomorrow night from 6:30 on, Restoring America. This kind of culminates everything you've been dealing with over the last 6 weeks.
Right.
Solutions for the court. Do away with them? What do we do?
Well, the legislature could.
Yeah.
Well, first we have to understand where we got the courts from. In 200 years before Christ, to about 150 BC, a man by the name of Polybius, a Greek man, great historian. Herodotus was probably a greater one, but Thucydides, but Polybius was a great historian, and he came up with the idea for the balance of power, a little bit different than we're doing today. And then 1,800 years later, it took 1,800 more years, and then we got a Frenchman by the name of Montesquieu, who wrote in 1748 a book called The Spirit of Laws. Not read very much. He took 20 years to put that book together. Brilliant book, and he said this is the way to set up a government. And it was just in the nick of time, because the Founding Fathers came along and they quoted Montesquieu many times during the Constitutional Convention and during their ratifying conventions, because he was the authority. And he suggested you have the executive, you have the legislature. The legislature is where the power is. Right. We get that from the Magna Carta. We always are going back to the Magna Carta. The legislature is where the power is. And then the courts are just there to give an opinion. They're very weak. Now, England used to have the courts and the executive tied together, and that was no good. But the courts are a very weak reed, a very weak part of the government, and all they're supposed to do is interpret the law and give an opinion. And if you ever get one of their cases like the Supreme Court, you'll see on the top it says opinion. There is no enforcement power.
Yeah.
They can have a writ of mandamus and get somebody before the court, but there's no enforcement power to do what they said, because Lincoln, Jackson, and Jefferson overruled the courts on different occasions. And we need to overrule Marbury versus Madison. That's a very bad thing. That's got to be gone.
Right.
And so that's one of the solutions.
Okay. So the courts could be overruled by the legislature or the president.
Right.
Can the Congress overrule the president?
They could overrule the president. And they have before, and we had...
other than a veto. Other than a veto override, right?
You've got the veto override,
right.
The two-thirds veto override.
Right.
And they did that in Taft-Hartley with Truman, the right to work. The legislature, if there's a bad decision by the court, and it's first of all, who takes an oath to the Constitution? The executive does. Everybody in the legislature does, and so does the judiciary. It's the same oath. They all take an oath to the Constitution. They've got to follow the Constitution. If the legislature doesn't think the court is following the Constitution, they can override the courts. There is a struggle between the executive and the legislature too. Now the executive can say, I'm not going to execute the law. And if the legislature wants to really get in a huff, they can get together, and they would have to have a good majority to overrule the president. But they're just supposed to write the law. And what you said in the break is that the courts have been writing the law, and they have. They've written it on many social issues. They have no business talking about social issues. Those are state issues. That's 10th Amendment stuff. That's the states. There's nothing enumerated about Roe versus Wade, 1973. That wasn't only a disgrace because of the issue itself. It's a disgrace because what Justice Blackmun wrote. Right. He was dreaming. He gave the history of all of these various histories of health and the Greek history and Roman history. It was just a horrible decision.
We seem to be in a constitutional crisis at the moment, Professor Marks, that we have a president that seems to be legislating from the executive branch with no pushback from Congress. Now, that's setting the wrong precedents, but he's getting away with it. Isn't it the job of the legislature to stop that?
Yeah, it is. And he's doing something very different than Jefferson, Jackson, and Lincoln did when they did not execute what they thought was unconstitutional. What the president is doing now is he is not executing the laws that the legislature have written. That's a very different thing. Right. And what the legislature has to do, they must override that. You should have Speaker of the House Boehner get up and explain what the Constitution says. He's not doing that. He's getting up and talking about budgets. He's talking about he doesn't like the president doing this. He doesn't think it's good. He's got to explain to the people the Constitution and what the authorities are, and then that would be a good teaching moment.
Congress also has the control of the purse.
Yes.
So if the president did do something, they could just not fund it.
Well, they had the choice to do that in the Affordable Health Care Act,
right.
And they haven't done that. They've kind of punted on it. They could do that. They have the power of the purse. But you know, the problem we've got now, Perry, I believe, is that the Congress is not going to change anything because they've done a lot of things very bad over the years. So what we have to do now is take Article 5, and we have to use George Mason's piece of the article where we send it back to the state legislatures. He was very foresighted in doing that in the Constitutional Convention. And you send it back to each state, and you get to 2/3 of the states, and you have a convention to amend the Constitution. And then out of that, you have to have 3/4 of the amendments that they suggested to go through as law. Right. So now we need to go back to the states, and I would prefer that each state elect these people, and it would be for the purposes of the convention, and I would approve an election of people, and I would like to see people elect grassroots people more than even politicians. But you can't get more grassroots than the state legislatures.
All right, so the solution for the president?
Well, the solution for the president, first of all, the president in 1946 got the power of employment. The president has no such power. The president has Article 2 powers. There's hardly anything in there. There's nothing in Article 2. It's mostly foreign policy. The president is not over housing and urban development. They're not over commerce. They're not over a myriad of cabinet positions. When we first started the country, we had Secretary of Treasury. We had an Attorney General. Edmund Randolph was a very good Attorney General. We had the Secretary of State was Jefferson, and we had the Secretary of War, we called it then. We changed it to Secretary of Defense in 1947. We had Henry Knox. You don't need all these various cabinet positions and all. You got a Secretary of Education. People have to understand that that's not a constitutional function of the executive branch. And by the way, let me just throw in this, since I'm talking in this one stream of thought here. Executive orders.
Right.
There is no grant for an executive order for the President of the United States except to the executive branch. He tells the Treasury, I would like to have you do this. He tells the Secretary of State, I would like this done. That's all. They don't have this other power. And it was Teddy Roosevelt who started the movement towards executive orders that were not constitutional.
Would you say, Professor Marks, that we're in constitutional crises?
Oh, there's no question about that.
All right. So is there a solution? Is there hope for us?
Yes. Yeah, there is. There is hope, and it's by way of education and having people understand the situation they're in. There's about 20 to 30% of the people really want to see the change, and that's enough to make the change. That's all we had when we had the Revolutionary War. People can, if they understand the powers of the Constitution, and we have, in my seminar, we have young people coming, and they come up and they say, I've never heard this before. I've never been taught before. And I tell them, you come to this seminar, you will never hear it before you came, and you're not going to hear it after you came. So pick it up right now, and I help them, and I email them, and do all these things. But these are the principles of America, and we can save the country, we can save the principles of America, but first we have to save the culture. That's number one. It's not balanced budgets. The culture is bad. It's in need of help. And Adam Smith, in his great Wealth of Nations, said, you can't have the culture debauch itself. If it does that, you lose everything.
And I would assume when you mean by the culture, we got to restore the traditional family. I mean, doesn't it go back down to that level? The
traditional family, we have to use the first 5 books. We need to read the whole Bible. Most people have a Bible in their home and they never read it. But we need the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and the Anglo-Saxon law is what Thomas Jefferson discovered was the answer to America. And he sent it to Madison with 200 books in 1784, 1786. He sent all of these books. Madison read every single one of them, and he was prepared. And that's the basis of America, is Jefferson. And it's Anglo-Saxon law, which is about 400 to 1000 AD, and then you've got the first 5 books of the Old Testament.
You're an inspiration.
Yay!
I want to do the whole series with you on camera because, you know, again, I think you kind of gave it away. We're not teaching this in school.
Right.
I don't know if it's deliberate, Maybe, I don't know, but
it's deliberate.
Okay, so when you sitting in there, and you said you had, when you were week 4 and you're dealing with Washington Creates America, you actually had people break out in tears.
Yeah, because they didn't understand, they never heard the story that in 1770, George Washington was in the western part of Pennsylvania, and he had Dr. Craik with him. Dr. Craik was his doctor who was with him at the end of his life. And Dr. Craik wrote in his diary this experience, that they were called in by an Indian chief. And the Indian chief called Washington and Dr. Craik in, and they wanted to talk to them. Now, Washington in 1755 should have been dead at the Battle of Monongahela. There's no question he should have died right there. But the word went out, divine providence is involved with this man. Well, in 1770, he was interviewed by these Indians, and this one Indian chief made a prophecy that he would lead a nation, he would be the spiritual head of a nation that would be the greatest nation that has ever been. And that was in 1770. That prophecy came true. He said more in the prophecy, and I talk about it in my lecture, but it's in the diary of Dr. Craik. It's never taught in the schools. No. Nobody knows about it. And this country is inspired and created by divine providence. Yeah.
You're a delight. I want to have you back. Again, let me just say to our viewers and listeners, catch the last of this 7-week series tomorrow night. It's going to be down at the Medford Library. It's free. It's going to be in the large conference room there. Starts at 6:30. Get there early so you have a good seat. And it'll go a little past 9. I wouldn't be surprised that you won't even know it's 9 o'clock. This stuff will go so fast. So, but we're going to get you back, Professor Marks. Thanks for what you're doing. And again, check it out tomorrow night at the Medford Library. God bless you, my friend.
Thank you very much.
We'll be right
God
back.
Bless you.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Hey, welcome back. What a delight to have with us today, Pastor Robert Morris. Now, you probably have seen this guy on other networks, but he's now made it to the big time because he's on the Dove TV network. And what a guy. Founding pastor of the Gateway Church, multi-campus evangelistic, spirit-empowered church in the Dallas-Fort Worth area there in the Metroplex, running about 36,000. I don't know how he pastors that many people. I got to get that. That's probably a show unto itself. Written all kinds of books, and you probably have seen them all over television. But today I am delighted to talk to him about his latest book. It's right here, called Truly Free, Breaking the Snares That So Easily Entangled. You may want to check this out by Thomas Nelson at the bookstores, online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I think you'll find it to be very inspiring. Pastor Morris, good to see you, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great, Barry. How are you?
Yeah, doing great. Good to see you. Well, why did you take this topic on? You've probably never been entangled.
Yeah, that's exactly why I did it. You know, I'm so free myself and have been for so many years, you know. So, well, I took it on actually as a sermon series at Gateway Church, and it just did so well, and it rang so true with so many people. We just knew we had to turn it into a book. And so many times I think we as Christians feel like, well, we can't have a bondage. You know, we might have a weakness. And if we call it a weakness, you know, then we need to strengthen ourselves. And we do need to build ourselves up, obviously. But if it's a bondage, then there's someone that can set us free. And that's where this book comes from.
How would you describe freedom?
Fear. How would I describe what?
Freedom. Truly free. How would you describe freedom?
Well, you know, Jesus talks about in John chapter 8, he said, you'll know the truth and the truth will make you free. And he said that to Jews that believed in him. So he said it to believers. And their answer is actually one of the funniest answers you'll ever read in the Bible. Think about this. These are Jews now. And they said, well, we're Abraham's descendants and we've never been in bondage to anyone. have you ever read the Bible? I mean, they've been in bondage to everyone, They've been in bondage to the Egyptians and the Chaldeans and the Babylonians. And when they made the statement, they were in bondage to the Romans. So Jesus comes back and says, listen, if you commit sin, you're a slave of sin. Now, that sounds like if we make a mistake, we're in bondage, but that's not what he's saying. That Greek word commit is actually the way we would use it in other ways. If you're committed, if you're in a, like committed to prison, if you're in a prison term, if you're in a sin that you can't get out of, you're in bondage to that. But then he comes back and says, but he whom the Son sets free is truly free. And that's where the book comes from.
Pastor Morris, why do you think your church responded so much to this? I mean, it would suggest that they were struggling with the issue. Were you surprised by that?
No, not at all, because in my opinion, everybody needs freedom because everybody lives in a fallen world. So I wasn't surprised at all. I was just so grateful when the Lord put it on my heart to share the series, because we believe every person, let me tell you how you know if you're a candidate for freedom ministry. If you can fog a mirror, then you are a candidate for freedom ministry. If you're alive, if you're living in a fallen world, you've had hurts happen to you, you've had disappointments, you've had discouragements, you've had attacks of the enemy, you've made mistakes yourself. So that's why I knew that it would relate to everyone. But it was such a God thing. It was like God put his thumbprint on it that we knew we had to put it into a book.
Great. Are there warning signs of somebody who may be entangled and not know it?
Yeah, there are. And I covered 3 big warning signs in one of the chapters. And one of them is continued iniquity. And that's what Jesus said in John chapter 8. If you're going to continue in a sin, you probably have a bondage in this area. So some sort of a sin or an iniquity that we feel like we've confessed over and over again, and we just can't get free. We just cannot break it. We can't discipline ourselves out of it. In the book, I quote Jack Hayford. Jack Hayford makes a great statement. He says, you can't cast out the flesh and you can't disciple a demon. And what he's in essence saying is there are 2 camps. One says, hey, all you need is deliverance, just pray over you and everything's done. Another one says, no, you need to discipline your flesh and disciple yourself. Well, we actually need both. Jesus came to set the captives free and to make disciples. And so one is that continued iniquity. Another is continued illness. There was a woman who had a spirit of infirmity. I'm not saying all sickness is of the devil, not at all. I'm not saying that means you got some bondage in your life. I'm just simply saying that there could be demonic influence there. And the third is demonic influence, because you had the woman who asked Jesus to cast the demon out of her daughter. And this was a little girl, and she already was being bothered by this. And we think about even today, we have demonic movies, demonic video games, all sorts of demonic games even, the occult, witchcraft. And many times we let our children play with these things and don't even realize that we could be opening the door to the wrong influence.
Wow. I would assume that most Christians would admit to themselves, maybe only at first, that they have some entanglements. What keeps them from dealing with it?
Yeah, I think so. I think most do admit that. I think one of the problems we have is that we feel like, well, if I'm a Christian, the devil can't bother me or get to me. And there are a couple examples that I use in the book to help us understand. If you're a Christian and you're headed to church and you forget to lock your door, or you leave a window open and you get home and there's a thief in your house, well, that thief doesn't own your house. We talk about demonic possession, and we say, well, we can't be possessed by the devil because obviously we're bought with a price. We're owned by God. Well, that thief, he doesn't own your house, but he might be in your house. He might have come in some other way, John 10 says, and he'll be stealing from you and trying to kill you and destroy you. And another example I use is under the influence. If a person drinks too much alcohol, he or she might do something, let's say that he's embarrassed about, totally out of character, hurts himself and others, and yet he does it because he's under the influence of something, whether he's a Christian or a non-Christian. He could become under the influence if he takes too much. In the same way, let's say that a man begins to look at pornography on the internet. He begins to come under an influence that one day he may do something that's totally out of character for him, embarrassing to him, hurts his family, hurts others, but he opened the door to a roaring lion who's going about seeking whom you may devour.
Wow. Before I take a break, let me ask you this. Is it pride that holds us back from getting help?
I think most of the time it is, and I think we all have a little pride. It's amazing that when if I say I'm going to preach on pride this morning, a lot of people go, I don't have any. And I wonder if that's a sign right there, you know. And you've got one of the classic examples of Peter, you know, and Jesus saying to Peter, all of you are going to stumble tonight. And Peter saying, not me. And Jesus said, you're the one that's going to deny me. But I wonder if Jesus wanted to say, which part of all do you not understand, Peter?
Well said. All right, let me take a quick break. Look, this is a great resource for you. It's called Truly Free, Breaking the Snares That So Easily Entangle by Robert Morris. By the way, we had an incredible endorsement by Max Lucado. Look for it by thomasnelson.com or Barnes & Noble at your Christian bookstore or online at Amazon. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Okay, we're back, and get a little bit of a technical thing. We'll get him here in just a moment. We'll have with us Pastor Robert Morris, and he's written a book. It is a tremendous resource. It's called Truly Free, Breaking the Snares That So Easily Entangle. And he deals with the big six. Let me tell you what they are. The snare of pride, the snare of bitterness, the snare of greed, the snare of lust, the snare in your mind, and the snare of past wounds. And these are probably the six big areas that would entangle somebody and keep them from being totally free. The question is, can you be freed from those? The answer is yes. The next question is how? Well, that's what this book deals with. And you perhaps have seen Pastor Morris. He is the pastor of Gateway Church there in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, running about 36,000 people on a weekend. He's authored numerous books and really quite the guy. So I think you'll find this to be a great resource. Now, one of the things about this book I think that is so interesting when you're dealing with the big three, and you know, Patrick Doyle and I talk about these a lot. There's the old saying, whatever is on your mind controls you. And it's the concealed sin that eats away at your soul and prohibits you from being totally set free. And the question is, can you go to a safe place, and I emphasize the word safe, where you can begin to express that and know that somebody's there to help you and to pray with you and to deal with those issues. And so he deals with that. It's called the snare of pride. The snare of bitterness, which I think is one of the biggies today, because a lot of people are bitter or angry because of the way they have been treated or perceived or actual injustices. The snare of greed. We're living in a world where instant gratification, whether it's through credit cards or buying things or whatever it is, we don't have the patience to wait for anything anymore. And sometimes that gets us into a lot of trouble. I think the biggie, when we get him back online here, I do want to talk about the biggie, and that is the snare of lust, since we live in this incredibly sexualized culture that we have in, and then your mind and past wounds. So he really deals with the big six in the book, and let me encourage you to get a copy of it. Again, it's called Truly Free, Breaking the Snares That So Easily Entangle. Those watching on theDove TV, there it is, and put out by Thomas Nelson. Pastor Morris, thanks. Sorry about all that, but you're looking good, man.
I think something happened on my end. I'm sorry, and I probably messed it up, but I'm glad to be back.
No problem. I was just mentioning you deal with the big six: pride, bitterness, greed, lust, the mind, and past wounds. And thank you for taking all of those on, because I'm sure we could talk a whole show on just one of those. The biggie, though, has to be with lust. And the reason I say, well, I shouldn't say the biggie. It's probably one of the bigger ones. But the point is that we live in this, everything has been sexualized and centralized in our culture. And it's the one thing that can be hidden for a long time before it finally surfaces. How do you deal with it?
Yeah, well, you have to deal with it one way, to just specifically, and I go through several ways in the book, and I go through a prayer at the end of the chapter and steps to take, and then there's a study guide that you can even go through. But one of the ways, obviously, is to renew our minds with the Word of God. And it's basically kind of like a computer, and we're all very familiar with it. We have this great hard drive system that God gave us in our mind, but what we've been doing for years is putting the wrong software in. We've been putting images in and things in that we didn't need to, and then we wonder why when we open up our screen, we're seeing all this horrible stuff. And we've got to put a new software in, and that's the Word of God. And we've also got to understand how dangerous this sin is. Proverbs 7 says that there was a young man that fell to this, and it says, makes this statement: he did not know that it would take his life. And another very just a small thing that I show is that it begins in the eye, not in the heart. And a lot of people don't realize that. Jesus said, he that looks upon a woman to lust. And Joseph talked about this woman looked on her with longing eyes. Job said, I've made a covenant with my eyes. I will not look upon this. And I've just helped so many people in this area to understand that lust begins with looking. If you can control what you look at, then you can overcome this. But again, I want to say the point of the book is that you also may need deliverance. You may need Jesus to set you free from a wound or a bondage or something that is the root. If I can say just one other thing on the root of bitterness, it says, don't let a root of bitterness spring up, or many will be defiled. And it says this, lest there be a fornicator among you. And what I found out was that the problem of lust in my own life, it wasn't the root that I thought it was. It was a root of bitterness that was in my family that opened up then to many being defiled.
Wow. That ties it all together. You know, Robert, you know, I had the chance to interview Jim Bakker when he first got out of prison. And I asked him the basic question, what went wrong? And I'll never forget his answer. He said, Perry, 95% of my life was in order, but the 5% I concealed from God brought down a multi-million-dollar ministry. He said, I thought I had a special arrangement with God to conceal that 5%, and look what it did.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we talk about in the book. Satan works in darkness. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And light dispels darkness. I mean, and there's no fight either. When you walk in a room and turn a light switch on, you know, if you've got bulbs and electricity, and obviously Jesus is the light, you turn the light on, there's no struggle. The fight isn't, you know, that, oh, it's going to take a while, you know. I mean, that light comes on and darkness is gone. And that's exactly the way it is with Jesus Christ, his delivering power, and the Word of God. If we'll turn the light on, we can dispel much of the darkness in our life. One of the great things to me about the book is that it simply causes us to get honest with ourselves. You know, repentance comes from two Greek words, metanoia. Meta means change and noia means mind. And simply as you're reading truth, not just this book, but lots of books, as you're reading truth, books that are based on the Word of God, that truth begins to set you free. And that's exactly what John 8:32 says.
All right, we're going to run out of time, but where does somebody start? They know they're entangled. They know, they feel it. They can't shake it. Where is a safe place for them to start?
Well, two places. One is, you know, a book like this, to where you can begin to understand what's going on. And secondly, to talk to someone, a pastor or a close friend, a godly person. You know, Scripture says, confess your faults to one another that you may be healed. That word healed, to be made whole, to be set free. It's even what the word translates sometimes saved. So, man, confess your faults to someone, get with someone, say, I need help, and then get some resources that'll help you.
Do you think the church is a safe place for people?
It's supposed to be a safe place for people. but the church is made up of people. And so I would try to find some safe people or a safe place, a safe church where you could. Church should be the safest place. And it should be the place where you can go and be honest. And a lot more churches now have honest and transparent ministers that aren't up there trying to say, hey, I got it all together and you guys need to get it together. You got a lot of churches now. A lot of them are my friends. You mentioned Max Lucado a moment ago. These guys are my friends. They love the Lord, and they're just very honest about their problems. And that helps people to say, hey, if that guy can be honest and open, maybe I can be honest and open too.
When you got done with this series, was there just must have been a tremendous, almost revival atmosphere in your church?
It was a revival atmosphere, and we have a ministry called Freedom Ministry. So many people followed up with that, and I put some of that material in the back of this book so people would know how to do that. But the main thing, again, was the light coming on. Hey, when I heard 30 years ago that I could be in bondage even as a Christian, it didn't make me sad. It made me happy because I knew if it was a bondage, someone could set me free. And that's the great news about this book. Greater is he that's in us than he that's in the world.
Wow. People want to correspond with you. Your website is theblessedlife.com.
That's one of them, theblessedlife.com, which is our television ministry. Another one is gatewaypeople.com, which is our church website.
What's next? This is fascinating. Are you in a sequel, a follow-up to this?
I am writing a follow-up book. I have a book coming out, a gift book at Christmas called Why Keep Praying? Because that's a big thing. When we prayed and prayed and prayed and nothing happens, why keep praying? And then next spring, we're going to release a book called Frequency, Tune In, Hear God. In the same way that you're speaking words and they're going out in the air, and if people tune into the right frequency, they can hear your voice. In the same way, I think God is speaking, and I believe the Bible shows us how we can tune in and hear God. And it's the number one question that I get asked is, how can I hear God? And that's what the next book's going to be about.
Oh, that's fascinating. Well, this one, folks, is an incredible must-read and a tremendous resource. It's probably a book you'll make a lot of notes in and then pass it on, or maybe not, buy a bunch of them and hand it out. It's called Truly Free, Breaking the Snares That So Easily Entangle by Pastor Robert Morris. Let me encourage you to check it out. It is put out by Thomas Nelson. Look for it at Amazon, on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. All right, now, you've had some people break free. How are they doing?
They're doing fantastic. I'm one of them. And that doesn't mean that I don't still fall and make mistakes, but there's a whole lot of difference in being completely in bondage and seeing no way out than on the other side of the prison bars to be free and to know, yes, I get tempted and I make mistakes every now and then, but I'm on the other side of the prison bars now. Is
there an incubation period from the time you're set free until, so you're going to be bombarded by the enemy? How do you guard that?
Well, I think there is a deliverance is a process and discipleship is a process. And if you remember, I'm saying we need both. I'm not saying we need one or the other. We don't simply need someone to pray over us, and we don't simply need to try to just discipline the flesh as much as we can, but we do need both. So both are a process of continually understanding what are the strongholds in my mind that have allowed me to go into this bondage, and I need to tear those strongholds down and build new strongholds based on the Word of God, and that's where the discipleship part comes in.
Well, you're an inspiration, my friend. Exciting. Thanks for doing this. We do a lot of counseling shows here on the Dove, and all of those 6 points that you have dealt with, we have handled one way or another. You ought to consider making each one of those 6 points a video series.
The whole book is a video curriculum. It has about a 20-minute teaching and then a study guide, so people can actually do this in like a small group setting or a church class or something like that.
Wonderful. Thanks, Pastor Morris. God bless you, my friend. Good to see you. Look forward to having you back often.
Thank you, Perry.
All right, God bless. All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, theDove.us.